Good morning. You're not getting away with that. Good morning. Good, much better. Well, so glad to see you here this morning, and let's just thank our musicians again. So I'd like to begin by reading a poem, and you may have heard me read this before because it's very special. What They Did Yesterday Afternoon by Warsan Shir. They set my aunt's house on fire. I cried the way women on TV do, folding at the middle like a 5-pound note. I called the boy who used to love me, tried to okay my voice. I said, hello. He said, Warsan, what's wrong? What's happened? Well, I've been praying, and these are what my prayers look like. Dear God, I come from 2 countries. One is thirsty, the other is on fire. Both need water. Later that night, I held an atlas in my lap. I ran my fingers across the whole world and whispered, where does it hurt? And it answered, everywhere. Everywhere, everywhere. Yes, everywhere. The world hurts everywhere. And many of the painful situations in this life are due to things that we really just can't fully control. The ravages of nature, so wildfires, floods, earthquakes, or pandemics, accidents. But many painful situations are, unfortunately, by our own design. But I think that this unfortunate reality can be shifted. We can make an impact, and this is our area of opportunity. We can move the needle, we can change, we can drift toward what is good and just. This morning, as I always do, I woke about 30 minutes before time for me to get out of the bed, and I read through the day's early news alerts. There were dire warnings about efforts to combat the newest variant of the coronavirus, details about the Supreme Court showdown over abortion rights, and worries about the Russia and Ukraine conflict. There was a reflection on the lives lost in the AIDS epidemic. And there was a story about the most recent school shooting in Michigan, and the lives lost and those forever altered in its wake. And I've spent a lot of time recently just pondering the question, how can we stop harming, injuring, and alienating each other? Because we hurt each other so well. We do it easily and naturally. And those who carry the mantle of religion and spirituality are not exempt. We so often hurt others the most in the name of what we hold so dear. I think of how our religious institutions have so often told our LGBTQIA+ friends and loved ones that they are not accepted instead of offering affirmation, supported by the belief that they are perfect and beautiful within the fullness of themselves, with their expressions of love and not in spite of them. So what do religions and spiritual traditions and secular ideologies say about caring for each other and not harming each other? Well, the list is long, but nowhere have I seen support for discriminating against your neighbor, hurting him, harming her, or making them feel unsafe. What many of you might not know about me is that I have a deep interest in, connection to, and desire to learn more about the religious and spiritual frameworks that nurture and have sustained Indigenous and oppressed populations across the globe. For 6 or 7 years, when I was in graduate school, I directed operations and programming for the International Association of Black Religions and Spiritualities, which was a nonprofit organization that was formed by a grant from the Ford Foundation and was housed at the University of Chicago. And when I think about, when I think about my experiences with that organization, I was fortunate enough to be able to spend significant time in Australia and across different parts of the world. But it was my time in Australia that I found to be so formative. I was fortunate to be housed by Aboriginal communities in the southeastern part of the country, in Port Augusta and in Adelaide. And there, sitting around the fire, while Indigenous delicacies were being roasted for our dinner, I was fortunate to be able to learn about dream time, or dreaming, which is so important in Indigenous Australian understandings of the cosmos. Dream time, or dreaming, for Australian Aboriginal people represents the time when ancestral spirits roamed over the land, creating life and creating important physical geographic formations and sites. And this Aboriginal spiritual belief, known as the dreaming, is based on the interrelation of all people and all things. The understandings of the past and of the spirit ancestors live on and will continue to live on in these stories and are handed down through the telling of legends, of art, ceremony, and songs. The dreaming explains the origins of the universe and past and present workings of nature and humanity, and shapes the understanding of family and community life, responsibilities and obligations, and the relations between people, the land, and the spirit world. Aboriginal people share their dreamings to pass on crucial information, cultural norms and values, traditions and law to the future generations. And over thousands of years, they have maintained a link with the dreaming stories, helping them to sustain a rich cultural heritage despite oppressive circumstances. So I think about the dreaming as a spiritual and cultural framework, which really reminds me of my own earliest religious and spiritual teachings at the knees of my mother, and which were very, very simple. They were to love God and to do unto others as I would have them do unto me. These ideas are the dreamings of my culture and of my family line, the notions that make my world retain its orbit and allow us all a place within it, connecting me with both my past and with my future. And when I think about what sustains me in this life, it is the knowledge that loving God and loving others was the foundation of the faith that enabled my African foremothers to endure the brutality of chattel enslavement, that allowed my Native American foremothers to endure the fear and the anguish of the Trail of Tears and other similar atrocities, and my Caucasian foremothers to atone for their entanglements in both. These are my dreamings. In her book, Dignity, Donna Hicks at Harvard writes about the differences between respect and dignity, with respect being that which must be earned based on our behaviors and our actions, and dignity being that which we are due based on the fact that we were born, because we are human and because we deserve it. She argues that many of the world's conflicts and disagreements, both large and small, are based on our failure to acknowledge and to honor the dignity that exists in others, and that logically, many of these same conflicts and social ills can be rectified by uplifting each other's dignity. What a radical notion. What a common sense notion. So why do we fail at this so often? I ask myself, how do I so often fail at this, and how can I do better? So you might not know that one of my skills, and I'm using that term extremely loosely, is in teaching liturgical dance to young children. For almost 6 years, in my church community, I formed a group of young ones between the ages of 5 and 15 who would learn a dance that I had choreographed, and then they would perform it once or twice a month for the congregation during our worship services. The dances were meticulously choreographed and rehearsed because I'm a perfectionist. But there was one song that we could not entirely choreograph. It was the very first song that my group of young dancers danced to, and it's called I Need You to Survive. Endless loops of this song proclaim, you pray for me, I pray for you. Now, I'm not going to sing this because you don't want me to do that. You pray for me, I pray for you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. And as the little ones danced, incorporating hugs, because this was pre-COVID, and greetings for all present into their routine, until everyone had been sufficiently hugged and greeted, well, this was the unscripted part, because we never knew exactly how people were going to respond to the message, to the hug, to the greeting. But their responses were always positive. So whether it was tears or a hug back or a wave. And if all of that sounds, I don't know, mundane or boring, you're wrong in ways that get to the heart of what makes I Need You to Survive such a powerful song. It's a deceivingly simple song with probably only 100 or so words repeated over and over. Powerful phrases, though. And as the words loop over and over, at one point in the live version, the music stops, and the singers and the listeners alike are encouraged to make the song personal, to face each other, to make the promise to pray for each other, to love each other, and not to harm each other. The song makes its point. We are responsible to each other in a community. We are responsible for each other. We're responsible for not harming each other with our words and with our actions. Why? Because we are important to each other, because we do love each other, and because we need each other to survive. So that particular song is a religious one, stating that it's God's will that every need that we have be supplied. But ultimately, the song puts the onus on us, that each of us needs to make a promise not to harm the other. The song feels somewhat intimate in its claims of love and of need, but ultimately, isn't this what relationships are based on? Some level of intimacy, of me acknowledging your humanity and your dignity, and you acknowledging mine, of us mutually agreeing that we need each other to survive, that we all exist in an intertwined web of humanity, depending upon each other, upon nature, the earth. These are our dreamings. Thank you.